The gift that you're lacking as a man, the superpower that you're lacking as a man, is the ability to be the same man in every single room. So I was having a conversation today with one of my coworkers, and I love this guy, great man. And I was telling him that we were talking about women, of course, we're talking about women, and he said that it's like a paradox that he was dealing with this woman that he didn't really care about, but he felt like he was able to be more of himself. But with the girl that he really wanted, he felt like he had to perform. He felt like he had to put on this act more. And I told him, you know, as well as we were talking, before I get ahead of myself, as we were talking, I was telling him, that like, yeah, the more real you are, people recognize real, but the more performative you are, people recognize that also. And it creates this sort of energy around you that you're trying to keep me around, and it's kind of repulsive, right? And he was explaining to me about that woman he didn't really want, she wanted him more because he didn't care, you know and I explained to him how, had he had that same energy with the woman that he really wanted, that she would have done the same for him. And it hit me in that moment that men don't really care about, whatever it is they desire, right? They just want the liberty, the power to be able to get whatever it is they want. A lot of men fall into this trap. Even when I was like scrolling today on Instagram, bullshitting on Instagram, there was this guy who was basically saying like, I love the thrill of the hunt more than actually catching the fish. What he meant like that in a dating sense was he loved the fact that he could actually catch a fish, go out and get one, but he didn't necessarily want one around. And when you're trying to prove something and you finally do it, you'll feel no longer the need to chase it or prove it again. You'll be like, it's just a check mark. You know what I mean? But my point with this is, and the reason I tell you guys this story is because most men really want to be the same man in every single room, the same man in front of the woman they don't want and the woman they really want, right? There's a different energy with the women that you don't want. You just don't give a fuck, so you're less filtered. But with the woman you do want, you start performing, you start feeling like, oh fuck, if I say the wrong thing, she's gonna leave. Oh my goodness, and then you fucking self-sabotage. You fucking self-sabotage, right? And that happens because you're performing. And when you're performing, being yourself is not sustainable because you're putting on a mask, you're putting on an act, you're putting your best foot forward, really, your best qualities out, so that way, you could seem as presentable to the fish as possible. And this happens to every single man. And under authority, you may shrink yourself. You may, like, so your boss, that he's an authority figure in your workplace, but at the end of the day he just got a dick and balls just like you, but you hate the fact that you shrink up around him. You suddenly get more timid and, yes sir captain, yes sir. A lot of men hate that shit. I know I was. And that's something that's been great about me that I've been blessed with, was that I never really dealt with that, to be honest. I've always seen owners and people of high regard as no different than me, because I see myself as a high regard. I see myself as a high status man. I see myself as a high value man. So that's never like happened. But with the women, it fucking did happen. The women that I really wanted, the nines, the eight and a halves, dude, I would start acting like a bitch. I would start acting like a bitch. And one of the most liberating gifts, and I could say I finally reached this point, the skills that I've earned, all praises to the Most High, is that ability to be myself with people that I don't necessarily care for, which is, whatever that means, and people I do really care for, people that I quote unquote should want to impress. I don't give a fuck. And it's not like I don't give a fuck about them. It's that I don't give a fuck about not about being filtered. Even on this camera, if you guys go watch my videos, I would hold certain things back. I don't really care. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like, to be able to express yourself as a man and be able to be authentic without being hyperly transparent, bro, it's such a blessing. It's such a blessing. And I find that a lot of guys really want that liberty. Is a lot of times like it's not even about like the woman or business or content or whatever it is that you're chasing. It's just the liberty to be able to be the same man in every single room. You see, I've told you guys this story many times. I was a business owner before. The business owner, that owner mentality, the ruler mindset, it never left me, despite going to a low state, despite working a warehouse job where I'm just pushing boxes and putting away shit. I've always still seen myself as that guy. So, that never changed about me. That authority that I carry, the presence, it never changed. It got diluted, but it never changed. And I'm so glad that I've been able to work myself to congruence, and really a lot of men out here are performing, especially you ambitious, competent men. When you feel like you always got to be on and you're always on edge and, you got a code switch and all that, that shit is draining, bro. That shit is draining. Now, don't get me wrong. You have to have discretion, which is the knowing when to say something and knowing when not to say it. But let's be honest, a lot of you, you guys hold yourselves back and you hold yourselves down really because you guys don't speak your mind when you need to. Someone slices you and you justify, maybe he didn't mean that. Maybe he didn't mean it that way. Even though damn well knowing he meant it that way, you know? And what I realized, when I was talking to this coworker and I was telling him, yeah, had you stayed the same way that you were with the other chick compared to the chick you really wanted, she would have respected you more. She would have chased you more. It's never really about like, them wanting more out of you. It's more so them seeing, especially women, can you lead? Because as a man, you need to be able to lead. You need to be able to set direction. You need to be able to set guidance. Your strength has to be felt. And if you could not stand on your principles and stay true to who you are and get swayed, even a woman will take advantage of you if you allow it, of course. Men, we test each other all the time. And, on a side tangent, real quick, a lot of men, they're very, conscious of, oh, is she testing me? Oh my goodness, she's going to test me. Bro, you test other guys all the time. You just may not realize it. Other guys test you all the time. You don't fold up to the pressure. Why? Because you don't give a fuck. But with women, you do. Or, with authority figures, you do. With your boss, you do. The more fucks you give, the more you're going to dilute yourself. But it's better to be honest with yourself that you care. I care about other people's opinion. But do you allow that care to weigh you down? I don't. Everybody cares about what other people think. I don't give a fuck what nobody say. If they don't, they're a liar. Straight up. Straight up. A lot of times dudes will be like, oh, I don't care what he says. Bro, that reaction tells me you're just very defensive and you're very like, ready on guard, ready to confront or ready to defend yourself. That's a hyper vigilant state of being, and that shit is super unhealthy. But that's a video for another day. The ability to be congruent is really a fucking superpower that every competent man needs, because all the tension that you hold within your system, within your nervous system, blocks your self-expression. It blocks you from expressing yourself the way you want. And you know what it blocks? It blocks connections that you need to create so that way you could have the life that you want. Connections with the women that you want, connections with like-minded individuals and like-minded men, connections with older people who respect you for your mind, for your intelligence, for your ambition. I've never like been one to hold back really what I want to say up until like, after the business, after the relationship ended and I went through like a major identity crisis. That's the first time I felt personally my self-expression blocked. I wouldn't say what I wanted to say for fear of judgment, for fear of being too much, for fear of, all these type of fears that affects every ambitious and competent man most times, but as I began to like work on myself, work on my identity, heal those traumas and those wounds, my self-expression started to, open up, and I began to express myself the way I wanted to. And you could always tell a man is not expressing himself the way he wants to when he slouched like this. When he slouched over, a man that's chest is, closed in and he slouched, that lets you know that man's body language is telling you everything. He doesn't express himself the way he wants. He holds back what he really means, and he holds back what's really on his mind for fear's sake. And like I said, you block a lot of connections that way. And when you block your ability to be congruent, the ability to be the same man in private, the same man in the gym, the same man in public, the same man with the specific woman that you want. When you block yourself, you're gonna block yourself from the blessings that you've been asking for. You're gonna block yourself from whatever it is that you've been working towards. And you'll tell yourself stories like, oh, people don't understand me, I'm too much to handle. And what's funny about stories like that is when you tell yourself things like that, they become true. You begin to subconsciously look for people that are going to reaffirm that to you. But then you never notice when you tell yourself stories like that, you never notice that you may even have one or two friends around you who actually do understand you. You may have family members that do understand. You may have ambitious people in your corner that you could reach out to, but you don't. Why? Because you want to stay who you are. You want to stay the man who's incongruent in every single room. You want to stay in that spot, right? But the moment you finally express yourself the way you want to, the way you envision yourself to, the presence, the authority, the deep voice, speaking from your diaphragm, knowing that you're the shit and letting dudes know that you're the shit, you're gonna meet like-minded individuals. You're gonna meet people that you were running away from or that you were pushing away because you weren't allowing yourself to be who you needed to be to attract those people, attract those women. The woman is gonna see you. She's gonna be like, okay, this guy's real. This guy's real with himself. Oh, this guy's real with other people. Damn, now all of a sudden, like, she feels the pressure of having to be real with you. She feels like, okay, like, shit, like, maybe I do need to test this guy leadership. Let me see if he cracks. And it's subconscious. I want you guys to understand that it is subconscious. People test each other all the time. All the time. All the time. And it's for safety's sake. Is this man a leader? How rooted is he in his identity? If he bends on his beliefs, his values, his morals, you're going to get even more tested. But if you stay true to who you are, which is why it's important to even know who you are, which is why it's important to even define who you are, who you want to be. When you stay rooted, people will trust you because you trust yourself. All an incongruent man is a man who hasn't learned how to trust himself across all domains. You probably, be frank with you haven't done the work. You've been in his shell for too long. Most times, often than not, when I see a man who's constantly self-sabotaging or running into people that they don't want to connect with, it's because they haven't learned how to express themselves socially. They've been too isolated for too long and they've been stuck in their own bubble. They may even say, like, I can't find anybody who's like me. Well, you don't really let your real self be out. So how are you ever gonna find anybody who's congruent like you? You're gonna find people who are incongruent actually because you're being incongruent. And like I said, the real liberty, the real gift is to be the same man in every single room that you walk in, despite authority, besides bosses, besides hot women, besides, X, Y, and Z. That is one of the most liberating states that you could be in because it means you're no longer performing. And when you're not performing and you're just being, you'll find yourself with more capacity, more energy to do more of what you need to get done to get everything you want out of life. And this is a part of life that most men neglect, is their ability to be congruent socially and in isolation. Peace.